Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna make a really nice different dress that I haven't done before, so I'm super excited for this project. It's gonna be a more couture-like dress, and it's probably gonna end up looking like a wedding dress. I'm gonna talk more about that in a second. I have the sketch right here, so if you can see, it is a midi dress that has a nude colored bodice underneath, and then everything else that is white right here will be ivory silk and then lace layered on top of it. And the lace is like a very specific lace. It's not like this small, thin, kind of stretchy lace that you can find in stores, or at least that is typical around here. It's more of a like thicker type of lace, which also has like a bigger type of pattern. And I'm super excited to make something out of this because I haven't done anything quite like this ever before, so really excited. And I would love to credit the designer that inspired me to do this dress, but sadly I don't have any name, so if you know the name, pop it down below in the comments and I'll make sure to pin that. I have a few things to say because over on my Instagram I did a few polls about which color combination or like lace color combination would look best for this dress, because I just couldn't decide. I was thinking, yeah, white, sure thing, that will always work. White layered on white, great, but that'll look like a wedding dress. And I'm not gonna get married anytime soon, so I don't know if I want to make a wedding dress type dress. But then I was like, okay, I'll put red underneath and yellow underneath and let you guys decide which color combination, lace combination you like best. And as you can see right here, you just wanted me to make the dress in white. So I was like, okay, what other options do I have? And I found from my stash this ivory silk that I used for another couture dress that I can link up in the eye if you want to check it out. And I still have a fair amount, so this should be more than enough for the dress. So that is what I will be going with. And also you decided after I also put this into the poll that ivory probably is the best color combination. Let me just quickly let my cat out. Now, speaking about the lace, I'm going to use this lace right here, which looks like this. So as you can see, it's like a very big type of pattern on it, and it kind of looks like something you would put on a table. It reminds me kind of my grandma's table topper, if that makes sense. I always liked these, so if it looks a bit grandma-y, that's good, in my opinion. And we're gonna layer this on top of the ivory silk, and this is what it's gonna end up looking like. So it's gonna look really nice, still wedding dressy, but not as much as with a pure white cotton satin that I would have been using otherwise. So this is the combination that we're gonna go for, and I'm super excited. We also have the bodice that is basically skin color. It's gonna be like up here, it's gonna get covered by the combination of these two, and then in the back all the way down to your waist it's basically skin color. And for that I have this mesh right here that I will be using. This is like a pretty sturdy material. There's gonna be a lot of tension on it. You don't want to use a weak type of fabric, so this is the best option. It does not rip at all, so this is really good and a nice thing because it's also super thin basically, so you're not going to be able to see anything showing through. And I cut out the bodice out of this, and then I will be cutting out the upper part here and then the skirt part out of the combination of these two, and then we're also going to line this dress. So it's going to be a super big project, but I'm excited and I hope you are too, so let's get started. So I was working around the upper part of my bodice, and I came to the conclusion that it's the best option to layer the lace on top of the silk and then work with it as one layer, because then nothing's going to shift, nothing's going to bubble up or anything. Like, there is just less problems with that. So for this I'm gonna do like the layering technique that I have been doing with like corsets and bodices and so on my channel before. So if you're a frequent viewer of my channel, you already know this. I cut out my silk pieces and then I layered the lace on top of it, just like making sure that everything is parallel and looks nice and like continues on the pattern and so on. And then I cut it out a tiny bit bigger baste it around my piece into the seam allowance and then cut off the lace to fit the exact pattern pieces. So that's what I did here, all of the prep work that I did for this. I'm going to do the exact same method for my skirt pieces because we have like these long panels of both silk and lace. So to not have any visible seams here in the front and in the back, I'm going to work with one layer as well. So I'm also going to baste them together and then use them as one fabric basically. And then we're just going to have a lining, so everything's going to be nice and neat on the inside as well. And then we also have the bodice, which is this right here, and it goes between waist and hip line. So it's a bit longer than I usually have my bodices, which I did on purpose because I noticed that it just fits nicer if it goes over the tightest spot, which is your waist, onto somewhere around the hip line. So I just cut it a tiny bit higher than the hip line to also not have like the widest point be more pronounced with another seam that might poke through. So that's what I did here. Okay, we're gonna start with putting the bodice together, and this follows like the routine that I always follow with bodices like this. And if you have watched my last video and then also the video with the green jacquard dress, I think 3 weeks ago, you already know this type of pattern right here. It's not quite the same, but it is made from the same base block, so the principle is the same. We're gonna close the front dividing seam first, and then we're gonna put the cup hood on top the cup hood seam right here before we close the side seam and the back dividing seam here, in order to have one bodice that is open in the center back where we'll put a zipper. So let's start with the front and side front pieces. The front lays on fold, and then we're gonna put right sides of the side front onto the front dividing seam. And while aligning all the notches, especially the one here, the bust notch in the rounded area here, we're gonna put the front dividing seam together. And I have the pieces together now, and I'm gonna iron both of the seam allowances towards the side because I'm not sure yet what I want to do with the seam allowance, if I want to put boning or anything like that into the seam at all, or if I want to like fold it inwards and then top stitch it like that to have a clean finish on the inside. Okay, I decided to just top stitch the seam allowance down like this and to not flip it over and under, because I just didn't leave enough room for my seam allowance. But that is something to consider, obviously, how you want to finish the seams for a transparent bodice. So make note of that. I just ironed it to one side and top stitched it and called it a day, as this fabric does not fray anyways, and it should be fine on the skin. If you have any other fabric that you're using for the bodice, obviously you need to finish it somehow. So maybe if you do French seams, you could avoid this problem, or if you just cut, for example, the pieces with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, then you can actually iron the raw edge into the seam and also top stitch it, basically doing like a felt seam, that is the word, in like just very intricate and tiny. But I will be doing it this way now, as I don't have any other options at the moment, but I'm fine with it too. So let's continue here. We're going to put the cup hood onto our front bodice like this, right sides together, while matching up all of the notches. Okay, let's finish the bodice by putting the side back and back pieces onto here as well. So let's close the side seams, and then finally the back dividing seam. So that is the bodice complete now. As you can see, I left the center back seams open. And what I would like to do already is to just put the upper part of the overlay together as well. It's the same principle, it's just tinier pieces, and we're gonna just put the front dividing seam seams together and then close the kaput seam up here. And we're gonna, different to the bodice, iron all of the seam allowances open just to avoid any bulk. This will be lined, so nothing of this will be visible anyways. And now once we put this over top here, you're gonna see that this fits onto the seam like a glove. This is where it's going to end up sitting. We want to put this right sides together though. So it's gonna be sewn from this side all the way up to wherever the points are. And to know where to sew, basically, we're going to draw our stitching guide onto the bodice right here. So I just put the piece underneath here. You can also do that before sewing the pieces together. So it's fine if it's not perfect, the drawing, especially here where it goes from one piece to the other. That's totally fine. We can make do with that. And now I'm just going to put this right sides together. So how you do this, and I'm going to repeat the same for the lining as well, is that you put your stitching line, so 1 centimeter measured inwards into your piece, onto the marked line on the bodice. These are gonna lay like opposite curves, kinda. But since we have a transparent layer, it's probably the wisest even to sew with the bodice on the upper side, because you can just simply see through. And like here you have to twist it weirdly like this and stitch right into the seam, into the stitching line of the bodice. So this can be quite a challenge, but if you prepare your seam accordingly, it should be fine and no problem. Now this looks super weird, but we're just going to stitch along the stitching line here to put these together. And now we have this overlay right here. Now we just have to iron this carefully. And this is what it looks like. So what I did for my skirt pieces was to actually see how I am able to kind of continue the pattern on my lace. And I did that. I made a reel about that too that you can check out over on my Instagram, but I'm going to quickly explain it to you here as well. I did that by cutting out my silk, so the ivory colored background, to the size of my pattern pieces, and then generously cut out a big piece of lace that allowed me to move the pattern across the silk piece. So that way I was able to start with my front piece, and the center front have this kind of hole punch pattern right here in the center front, and then this part of the lace on either side. So this lace also is not mirrored, so it just continues on from one selvage to the other side. So I couldn't mirror the design, if that makes sense, because that just did not work with my lace. Obviously your lace will be different, so that might work for you too, but I had to work around a continuous pattern, and I did that by kind of faking the continuation over the seams here. So I made sure to not have, you know, if this is basically what I am working with, I made sure to not immediately after have this exact pattern on my lace, like right next to it. So as you can see, I was able to kind of fluently continue the pattern all the way to the center back that way. And it's really, really helpful to use a bigger piece of lace that you just put flat on your size background, pin it in place, sew it in place, and then cut to size. That's very important, the order of things here. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to have, you know, the best result that you might be able to have otherwise. So that is what I did here. And with this prepared, we can go ahead and put the skirt together already. It's simple enough. We're just going to put right sides together and match up all of the notches that are in the skirt throughout the length, and continue on doing that until we reach the center back, and repeat the same for the other side, having the center back open. Guys, I think I have a problem. I don't think I like the length on this. It's like going further down, so like mid calves. They think it's too much. It looks too much tabletop-y. So I think I'm gonna cut it to be like a mini skirt, because I really don't know what else to do, and to me, it just looks too grandma-y, like too tabletop-y. I'm not sure why, but I just feel like this is too much the same thing. Like, it just looks not good, let's be honest. And that's also something that you have to address in the process of making things. If you come to a point where you're not satisfied with what you did, you need to change it and adapt to whatever looks best. And I really like this top part. I think it looks really, really nice. I also like the shape of the skirt coming up right here, but it's just too much. So I'm going to cut it somewhere here, probably going to do the length that I did for my mini skirt Jen and adjust it that way and cut it off somewhere here, and do the same to the lining and work with that. Okay, so I determined the length, and now I'm just going to add the facing that I also have on this hem here, which is 4 centimeters plus seam allowance. And that's where I'm going to cut off the skirt. So now it's shortened, no way to go one step back. And what I will be doing here to just get a clean hem is add some tape, or like not tape, but like interfacing, that I will be putting just underneath my line. So into the hem basically, minus the seam allowance. So this measures 4 centimeters, and that way I'm gonna get like a really crisp, clean hem. And obviously I should have added that before putting the seams together, since I cut it down now with the seams already together. There's no possibility for me to do that, so I'm adding it now. And what this is gonna do, it's gonna make it super easy for me to actually iron the hem upwards, because now I have like a guideline underneath, so I can go ahead and do that already as well. And I don't have to measure anything for that, because the tape underneath it tells me already where to iron. So just as I did with the upper part of my bodice here, I also drew on the stitching line for my skirt part. And same as I did for the bodice, I'm also going to put right sides of my skirt onto my bodice, trying to line up everything as best as I can. It's best to do it with the transparent bodice facing the top, because then you can see both the line and also the seam allowance. And here I want to make sure to match up both seams in bodice and skirt, because they should match up. In the pattern they match up as well. So if there is anything like not perfectly matching up, just ease them together, because one material might have shrunk a tiny bit rather than the other. So that way you just make sure that the pattern stays even as intended. And now I can go ahead and sew these together. And now once this is flipped right sides out, this should be what it looks like. So there should be the drawn in curve. And now all that's left here is to iron the seam allowance, or like the bodice in general, down into the skirt. So the next step is to put the lining together already, and the lining is similar to the fashion fabric. It just has darts instead of seams anywhere where possible. So basically put together the lining by closing all of the darts in the upper part. You're going to find that there is no cup hood piece, but 3 pieces, and the center piece has 2 itty bitty darts that you have to close, and then you just close the front dividing seams. And for the skirt part, you only have darts in the front and the back, and then you just close the side seams and iron all of the seam allowances always towards the back, and that's it. Afterwards we can continue putting the lining in. So I was thinking about how I want to put the lining pieces onto the dress, and I thought the best thing to do here was to close the neckline and sew in the straps that I prepared as well. And then afterwards we're going to probably have to hand sew the lower portion onto the dress, or we can try to stitch in the ditch and fix it in the place that way. But this up here is the important seam that we want to close before anything else. So to prepare, I think I'm going to iron in the seam allowance all around except for the neckline. And then once I put this in, I have a clean edge to work with that I can either whip stitch on or stitch in the ditch and fix in place by machine. So we'll determine that once it's time for that. But the first thing that we have to do is take our dress, put it right sides up, and place our straps here into the corners at the neckline. I have these straps, so they're basically just some trim that I cut to size. I cut down 40 centimeters each. That is what I fitted before. But I'm going to only sew it on here into the corners for now, because we're gonna have to finish the edges here for the bodice first, and then afterwards we're gonna fix the other side of the strap in place. So we still have time to adjust the length if it was too long. So that is something that I will be doing once I can put the dress on for the first time. So once the zipper and everything is in, I'm going to put the straps right sides together into the corners, making sure to catch both the fashion fabric and the bodice while doing so, and same to the other side. And now with these in place, I can go ahead and put right sides of the lining also onto the neckline. And here I'm going to stitch right to the fold here and back tag. So once I flip it, this already is folded inwards and neat. And now I can go ahead and close the neckline from this point here all the way over to the other side. Okay, and I already understitched the seam here as well, as you can see, and that way it's just easier to iron the seam allowance where it's supposed to be. So let's do that next. I'm going to cut away the corners except for the trim right here, because it's going to have the most pressure, so we need all the seam allowance that we have there, but the other corners are just going to bulk up, so I'm going to cut those away. And we can already go ahead and turn it right sides out and start ironing the neckline so that the ditch of the seam is visible on the lining side. And as you can see, the bodice obviously is going to get turned as well, so we can go ahead and also iron that in place. We can then top stitch that too, and that is finished as well. If this has a bit of tension on it, you can cut into the seam allowance here around the front neckline to just open it up a bit, and then it's going to lay nicer. As you can see, there's a lot of tension on it. It opens up immediately after you cut towards the stitching line, so this is going to help it lay nicer in the very end, and probably is also going to help you iron. So if you have that, go ahead and do that before you iron. And I'm just quickly going to pin this in place here at specific spots like the center front and the dividing seams. And this part right here, I'm just gonna sew in by hand using just a whip stitch, probably trying to make it as invisible as I can. So I'm not gonna like stitch into the bodice without the fashion layer on it, but I'm always gonna stay inside the perimeter of the fashion layer of my upper portion here, so that nothing of this will be visible in the end. Probably going to do that in front of the TV or something, so I'm not going to do it right now. You can do that at the very end still, and everything should still function properly and in order, you know, like that doesn't really matter. So I'm going to leave it as is right now and continue on with the skirt. For the skirt, we don't have to do too much. We're just going to put the skirt on exactly the same way as the fashion layer. So we already have our curve where we want to put it on. We already have that drawn in or marked by the fashion layer. So we're only going to put right sides together here and also match like with the bodice hanging loosely here. So we're going to match up the dividing seams with the darts in this case. Okay, and now once we iron this, this should already, since we never stitched outside of the seam allowance, be hidden by the fold that we ironed into the front piece. As you can see, it peeks through here, so it's always invisible. Like that. And we can already go ahead and put the zipper in actually. I'm quickly going to just top stitch the neckline down here just to fix it in place and to have everything, you know, look the same. So it's basically just gonna look like I finished the seams here that are vertical. To put the zipper in, we have to take the lining and put it out of the way basically. I am just going to cut into my lining at the fold line and cut 1 centimeter inwards like this, so that I can fold it out of the way. And I'm actually going to pin it out of the way in order to, you know, not have to worry if my zipper is gonna catch it or not, because that is exactly what we're gonna do next. I have my inseam zipper right here in a nude color. So I'm going to open the zipper up and check where the plastic stopper is by folding the seam allowance here to the side, because right where this ends is the point where we have to meet with the fold on our bodice. The rest is just gonna hang over like this. So I'm going to just pin it in place here and then just work my way down until I reach the zipper notch. Now the zipper notch for the length of my skirt is pretty close to the hemline. It's actually right down here. So that is exactly until where I'm going to pin the zipper in place. And I also pinned my bodice onto the fashion layer because that's gonna act as one layer basically. And now I can go ahead and sew the zipper in place just until the zipper notch. And now, as I do always, I just marked a few spots that are important, like the waistline, for example, and I can now transfer that onto the other side using horizontal pins. And now I can also go ahead and sew the other side in place. And now that I closed it, this is what it looks like. As you can see, everything fits together very, very well. I can go ahead and iron this nicely so that also here in the skirt portion the nude color for the zipper is not really that visible. I'm probably going to cut down the zigzag right here for the zipper because it's just it just looks weird, and then going to hand stitch the seam allowance down as I already pinned it right here. And now when I flip them and fold them down, like I already prepared, this should look way better. Now let's do the lining. So for the lining we have to do each side separately. We cut into the seam allowance here, and now we kind of need to flip it down onto the zipper band. So we basically have to ignore all of this that is up here and just try to align it as best as possible, and probably not going to stitch all the way up until the edge, but like leave 5 millimeters or something like that empty here, because the zipper is going to continue underneath it and it's just not going to work out nicely. And we're going to stitch down all the way to the zipper notch in the lining as well. And we also have the notches here that we can align, and then just use a one-sided zipper foot to put the lining onto the zipper band. And I'm going to just go down a tiny bit, like 5 millimeters, not start right at the edge up here, but like go down a tiny bit and then start sewing all the way up until the zipper notch. And I'm going to do the same for the other side. Let's also iron the lining here at the zipper. And I also went ahead up here where like the weird fold is happening and bar tacked everything neatly in place so that the zipper just lays flat and open so that the teeth don't catch anything while zipping up. And now we can go ahead and close the remaining center back seam. This is the same as with every lined zipper. We're just going to put right sides together and start from the hem sewing upwards, getting as closely as we can to the stitching line here, but continuing on like visually the stitching line. You're not going to be able to go all the way to the stitching line, but like stop 5 millimeters before, or like 1 centimeter, and continue on the stitching line that way. And for the fashion layer, we're going to fold down the hem facing and do the same here. So we're just going to also stitch as far as we can and continue on visually the stitching line. So for me here, I want to iron the seam allowance of my fashion layer open to avoid any more bulk. And then for the lining layer, I just want the inside to just lay flat and neat, like that. And now I can flip the seam allowance back up here in the hem. And I'm going to finish the hem separately for both of these. For the fashion layer, I'm going to overlock the hem and then bar tack it in place at a few spots. It's going to be invisible for me and my fabric anyways, but if you have anything else, you can try and stitch in the ditch here for the dividing seams, or you can also hand stitch it or do a blind stitch. And then for the lining, I'm going to double fold the lining and top stitch it so that I have like a very neat finish for the hem and the lining, and it's just going to sit like a few centimeters above the fold of the actual hem. Once that's done, we just have to fit it and just, you know, size the straps, which are then going to get bar tagged onto where I have the back dividing seam right here, somewhere there, and it just depends on how long we need the straps like this. And of course, I'm going to do that off camera. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I'm super excited what this dress looks like worn because I have not seen it on me yet. And I hope you are too, so I'm going to put all of the videos as per usual at the very end of this video. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post on Sundays, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, all of the in-between reels and tips and tricks are on my Instagram, so definitely worth checking out and give me a follow there. I might have a little surprise that I have been teasing in my stories for a few weeks already. It's small, white, and very fluffy. So if you want to know what that's all about, go ahead and check it out over on my Instagram. In my stories, I update you daily if I have news regarding that. But I'm super, super excited and happy. The most direct way to support me and keep videos just like this one coming is to hop over to my Etsy store, where you also can find the pattern for this dress and also so many other patterns that I have videos on here on my channel. So if you find anything that you like on my channel, you can be sure that there is a pattern available on my shop. I think there's only like a few that I don't have, but most of them are on my shop, so go ahead and check them out. The link is always in the description down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Also, I have a channel membership, so if you want to support me with a small subscription fee for a few benefits, you can go ahead and check that out. Link is also down in the description below. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys!